The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. But suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descending from and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has been raised from the dead. And indeed, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him." This is my message for you. So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. But suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings!" And they came to his feet and worshipped him. Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Thanks, the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Whether or not it is actually accurate or helpful, we often in our lives think about resurrection in this way. And I'm going to kind of explain what I mean by that. For a while, Jesus is on earth with us, right? And then, of course, what does Jesus do? He goes up into heaven. Right? And as we confess in the Creed, he ascended into heaven, that dwelling place of God, some place up in the sky that we really can't some place up in the sky that we really can't reach ourselves right now. And Jesus, he's seated at the right hand of God, and this is God Almighty, so of course God has a golden throne up here in heaven, right? It's just this wonderful, holy place. And the saints who have all died in the faith, they are there praising God. This golden place, someplace far away. And then in our gospel, you hear about God sending an angel back down to earth. The angel says to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who is crucified. He's not here, for he has been raised." And so we assume, he's right up all the way in heaven with God at the right hand of the Father. He's resurrected and he goes, prepares a place for us. So it's not quite, I forgot my mansion. But we hear in John 14 about how God goes ahead of us. Jesus says, "I go and prepare a place for you." And many rooms there. And in the King James, we're familiar with mansion. So imagine there's this giant mansion up here too, right? And that's where we go here too, right? And that's where we go when we die. When Jesus is resurrected, he goes, prepares a place for us in heaven. And God's work and the cross and resurrection is done. And the thing is, our life continues. And it's kind of this journey. We start all the way down here in the waters of baptism. We begin this journey. We spend our lives faithfully working our way up to heaven, to be in paradise with God, to arrive at that mansion, that place that God has prepared for us, to join the faithful departed, to bask in the glory of God where there's no weeping or mourning or pain. And of course, this Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. There's this one-way path to God. Honestly, it's more we think about our way to heaven. We're not thinking so much about God. But the reality is, though, of course, this mountain is not to scale. You can figure that out. It's not a simple journey. Just like any kind of mountain climbing, we struggle to climb, right? It's not a smooth ascent. There are ups and downs along the way. There are false peaks, and you got to keep going. Sometimes we just get it wrong, right? Fancy. Sometimes we just fall backwards. We're doing well, and things just don't go well, and so we end up closer to where we started for all the work we've done. And of course, I don't know if you noticed my person here, big backpack. Because the other reality, too, is we're climbing up, we gain a lot of baggage along the way. And that baggage, it's on our back. Everyone else can see it, but, we can't see that baggage. But we are carrying it with us, and it is a heavy load. Again, that backpack's not even to scale either. It would be much bigger. And with all these ups and downs and trips and hazards, this long journey to get to God, all that weight that we're carrying, sometimes that journey can be so arduous, it feels like hell along the way. Sometimes that journey all by ourselves here, we feel so lonely, especially with God all the way up in here in heaven, in some place we can't imagine or get to. And so we revise this picture, right? So we get up a little bit. And at Easter and times like that, we talk about how God comes to us, right? Joins us in our journey. Sometimes we like to think about, Jesus is right beside us. He's holding our hand. He's comforting us. He's encouraging us. He's picking us up when we fall down. Sometimes we think about Jesus being ahead of us, right? He's leading us, showing us which way to go, pointing out the hazards so we don't trip and fall and hurt ourselves. Or sometimes we imagine he's behind us, pushing us up the mountain when we don't have the strength, when we're tired and exhausted, when we just don't want to go on anymore. And sometimes we even like to imagine Jesus is carrying us, right? Because it's a hard journey, this life. After all, we're not saved by works. It's by the grace of God that we get to the top of that mountain. But the thing is, there's still even a problem with this picture of God, this picture of our own lives. For those of you who are aging, you know that as you get closer to the top, it doesn't feel any more heavenly, right? Sometimes it even feels like the air up there is a little thin. Because there's pains and disability and even memory loss sometimes, and even away. For some, even as they're going up that mountain, their life is cut short. But here's the biggest problem. Those times when we feel like we are on top of the world, when we've got it together, when things are going well, when we are feeling so blessed, when things are going our way, suddenly the landscape changes. And we step into hell. A loved one, one of those people who makes our life worth living, who makes it what it is, they have a stroke, or they die, or they kill themselves, or they divorce us, Sometimes we step into hell when there's injury or illness or disability that stop our ascent right there. It's right when we think we finally have it all together. There's times when we're awfully alone. Instead of rising, we're sinking. Sometimes we even think that this mountain that we're climbing, we realize maybe we're climbing our own mountain, not the right one. And it keeps going down and down. mistakes and our pride and our arrogance get to us. We get stuck here. We get stuck in that spot, not all the way there yet. We swim in pain, in suffering, in loss, in failure, and in shame. There are some not as simple as just turning back around. We just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And our hell feels deeper and deeper and deeper. Out of control, and heaven seems a very, very long way away from where we are in our lives. And everything that we touch, it burns us. You know, when life's not going well and something bad happens, but then everything else piles on top of it, like, you know, you get a ticket for speeding, or you're passed up for a promotion. All these things are fuel for the fire. And we find ourselves swimming in hell, the absence of all goodness and all love. Maybe you have been down here before, not even just here, but all the way down there. Right? If you fought in a war, if you fought with loved ones, you know what that hell can be like. You know what hell is like even in this life. Job, in the Bible, we cry out to God. We wonder where God is. God seems so far away in heaven. Could God be with us? And so then we hear in Psalm 139, where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are still there. So Jesus, he lived with us. He suffered the loss of his friend Lazarus. He was betrayed and abandoned by his friends. He knew the pain of abandoning his loved ones when he was on the cross, leaving his mother and his friends alone and orphaned. He knew terrible beatings and being hung out to dry with criminals and death on a cross, and he risks coming to us, even if it means he gets burned a little bit, because God loves us. We confess that when Jesus died, he descended into hell. That's a part we don't focus a lot on, and that is true. The worst place that we can imagine ever being ourselves, God has been. God knows that feeling, and God is present. What's it change? Is it just in him leading us out, or pulling us out, or pushing us out, or carrying us out? But maybe this image still is not the right image for our life of faith. Because what is it that the angel said when those women came? They did not say, "Be happy, Jesus rose from the dead. No matter how bad it is now, you'll get to go to heaven with him someday in a beautiful mansion." It's not what the angel said. Right? It's not that God is up in heaven and we need to get there with God. Rather, that angel, it says, he has gone ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. Jesus comes to this place long before we ever get here. God knows that place when we get here. God knows that place long before we ever know that place. Wherever God knows that we will be sometime in our life, God has been there. The Creator knows the reality of life and the death that comes with it. So think, though, what happens when God descends into hell, the place that is the absence of all good and love and God. It's no longer hell if God is there. If God is the epitome of love and grace and all goodness, it's no longer hell. It's the dwelling place of God. And so sometimes in our hell, we get a glimmer of hope. It's a little bit of that green, right? That random kindness in a sea of pain, that merciful healing, relief from symptoms, or just simply watching a child reminds us of goodness. And so whatever hell we find ourselves in, God changes it. And we start to see heaven emerge again, the life that God has given us emerge again in the hearts and the words and the hands of the people that God has given us. Maybe we find new opportunities that we didn't even know existed, right? New gifts from God. And pretty soon, out of it, we can see that there's life for us again. This is redemption. This is resurrection. This is what the cross is about. That God takes the death of all goodness and life and brings new life out of it. But to realize what God is doing. And sometimes we can't see what God is doing as it's happening. We don't feel the ground moving beneath us, but God is at work bringing new life. Maybe we don't get healing, but we get more reconciliation with loved ones. That failure leads to learning or doing something even different and better. Or the end of what we know leads us to something new and wonderful. And so resurrection is not just about getting to heaven. It's about changing and redeeming this life too. Changing and redeeming this life too. Life is a whole cycle of death and resurrection. Death and resurrection every single day. And God is with us throughout it all. It may feel futile. It may feel like we're never getting to the top. But life's not about getting to heaven or getting to God. God is already with us. And so maybe, again, this is still the wrong picture. The cross and resurrection of Jesus show us that what we had in mind about God and about life is all wrong. That God's not just ahead of us, a couple steps ahead, but God is way ahead of us, preparing a place for us. That God is not just reactive to the bad things that happen in life, but God is proactive. Even though we can't see it in the midst of the journey. From the beginning of creation, God's been making space for us. From the very beginning of creation, God knew the hells, the chaos that we would experience. And like Adam and Eve, we were not content to trust God all the time. And that mountain journey was a mountain journey of our own making, heading out of Eden, not to God, but from God. It's about a deep, deep love. God plans for those moments of hell to redeem them. From the very beginning of creation, God's not giving us a mountain to climb, hoops to jump through. God's not designing hell or fire or brimstone or any of those things for us. God plays for us. The angel says, go ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. Galilee, that is, for the disciples, that's home. Wherever the journey takes us, God prepares a place for us. God makes that place wherever it is, home. And this whole time that we feel we've been toiling, succeeding, suffering, redeeming, we live and we dwell in the very heart of God. From the very beginning of creation, God created space for us, that our whole life would be living in that heart of God. Jeremiah says, I have loved you with an everlasting love, an almighty, everlasting love. It's an everlasting love. It's a deep love, a passionate love. In Jeremiah, when he's writing, God's not speaking to the people who are prosperous on top of the mountain. He's speaking to people that are down in the valley, that are living in hell. So no matter what mountains you face in your life, whether you are some days on top of the world or falling into some unexpected hell, know that God is with you, but also ahead of you, creating a place for you to live. No matter where you find yourself on any given day, there is hope and healing and redemption and life in the very heart of God, who loves you with an everlasting, almighty, deep, and passionate love.